On this week's video, I'll show you how I shape up this 16-inch camphor laurel blank into a beautiful wet sanded salad bowl, whilst using the vacuum pump to finish things off, of course. And I'll start there with the Glen Lucas remounting plate. You'll see the gap in the middle, and that's designed to have the end grain sitting in the middle of that, because when a bowl dries, it warps and the end grain raises and the side grain drops. So it gives a big surface area for that side grain to sit on that rubber. I use the cup centre to secure the bowl onto the plate because a cone centre will continue to drive into the timber. So a cup centre works perfectly for this application. And now I'll show you how I balance the bowl up. I look for the most obvious widest point, which I've found. Undo that tailstock slightly and then shuffle it across ever so slightly. Small movements work best. And then when it's running true, or true-ish, I lock everything off. That mask is a 3M VersaFlow, if anyone's interested as well. So I start by removing bulk of the material down the bottom where that Roman ogee will end up being, and getting clearance away from the tailstock so I can do push cuts, or at least attempt to do push cuts. Down to the tenon, take some material away from there, because I always have larger tenons when I'm coring, which gives me wriggle room to remove material later on. Set of Vicmark dovetail jaws there, and the tool rest is at centre height, and I lightly touch that left side, and the right side of the dividers shadows the line that the left side makes, so the right side doesn't touch, because otherwise they'll go flying across your workshop. And that creates a perfect circle, which I'll show later on. You'll see this line here. That's where I come around to get clearance away from the tailstock so I can do push cuts. Now this, some people might not see this, this is how I create a 1/3 foot for my salad bowls. So a general rule, Woodturn has made up that for a really nice looking shape for a salad bowl, the foot is 1/3 of the overall diameter of the bowl. And now we're going to attempt a few little push cuts here where I get a bit greedy and have to come back and then come back. There we go. Oop, bit more. Let me know what you think of this type of video as well. I'd be interested to see what my regular viewers think of the narration. So as you saw there, my tool came towards myself to go in, and then when I want it to run up the side, I bring the tool back towards the lathe, the tool handle. A little bit of a cleaning down the bottom there where that join is. Now the 1-inch skew, I prefer to shape my tenons up with the 1-inch skew. I just eyeball it up to that line that I made previously and drive it towards the headstock. A little bit of tidying up on the base here. I'll get a detail gouge and then do a little bit of cleaning on the bottom there. That footage that you're seeing now, let me know what you think of it, because some people like it, some people don't. It makes my life easier. It's a camera that's attached around my neck. I take it off to do neat shots like this, so you think how I've got to keep you guessing of how I do it. Now, removing this sometimes can be a bit tricky. I've heard some people use plastic washers on their spindle, but I don't use those because I have to have good connection between the spindle and the back of the chuck jaws or the faceplate, because when I spin in reverse, I don't want them unbinding and coming off. That's why I give those chuck jaws a little flick at the end. This is the circle I was talking about. Creating that perfect circle allows for the chuck jaws to work the most efficiently because it's got maximum contact to that tenon. And now I'm going to shape up the rim, and I'm going to show you a little trick here where you use a pencil and you can see how warped out of shape the bowl is, but it allows you to just keep turning and work towards that line. 16mm gouge, a 45-degree bevel that I'm using there. Now here's the pencil. You'll see on the left and compare it to the right. So much more timber on the right that needs to be removed. Back to the 19mm, and this is just going to hog out the timber. Now during this cut, I should bring that tool handle up so it's a little bit more parallel to the floor, but I seem to get away with it. $19mm gouge, just starting to slowly create that undercut rim that I like. And it just feels nice when you hold it in your hand. Back to the 16mm. And I found a little bit of vibration, so I just slightly touched the back of the bowl whilst I'm supporting that tool going in. That just reduces the amount of chatter. And I'm just working down to the bottom here because I'll go to the bottom bowl gouge in a second. See where I'm setting up my banjo and the tool rest? I learnt this off Glenn Lucas on how to use the bottom bowl gouge the most efficiently, or how to use it entirely. And that allows the tool to be at 90-degree angle to your tool rest, supporting that tool all the way down to the base. Because if you have it the other way, you'll have too much overhang. Found a little ridge in there, so I'm just going to use that French curve scraper. Now I've marked either side of that ridge so I don't scrape the entire bowl. I like to use bowl gouges and have a bowl gouge finish, and just use scrapers just to do little tidy ups along the way. Now when it comes to sanding, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I've made other videos on sanding, as you're probably all aware, but please find those and hopefully they help you out as well. I stop at 320 grit, get 600 grit wet and dry sandpaper, Dr. Woodshop's walnut oil, and I'm not sponsored. This is the money shot right here. I lather the entire bowl up. And allow it to rest for about 10 minutes whilst that oil soaks right into the timber. You'll find that the end grain sometimes needs a little bit more oil. So just go by feel and how it's looking. And if it's drinking it up, just apply a little bit more. I'm aiming to get little fines building up in front of the sandpaper, and that creates a real fine abrasive paste. And then buff the oil off, creating a lot of heat. Now I leave the bowl after the first coat for a day to dry. You'll see these dowels on the wall. That's just an old broom handle. I think it might have even been my mother-in-law's. That there is the Vickmark vacuum chuck. And down here is the Rothenberger vacuum pump that I got off a good friend of mine. Her brother was is an air condition technician, and that is the rotating union from Vickmark. I'll show you how I attach this. There's so many ways of removing tenons as well, and I have made a video on removing tenons, so please check that out later on if you find that is something that you need to see some different ways on how to do things. I don't claim to know everything, I just love sharing what I'm learning. Back to the 16mm gouge, that's a 45-degree bevel on there with a lot of that heel removed, and I used that tool earlier as well. Mike Mahoney just released a video on YouTube here on all his knowledge on sharpening, and I'm sure it's not all his knowledge, but a great depth of knowledge on different angles and sharpening as well. Little nice trim cut coming across the bottom here. And I use a skew to add a little bit of detail, which you'll see in just a sec. I'll also show you how I brand the bottom of my bowls and platters as well. That burner is ancient, still works an absolute treat. I think it's missing a screw from in the centre there, but .320 grit sandpaper, just lightly touching that detail. I don't hit it as hard with the drill because I want to keep that fine detail in there. I make some circles whilst the lathe is running on the base of the bowl so I can centre the branding iron perfectly. You can see those lines really lightly. Rock it back and forth. A nice even brand there. Once that first coat is on and it dries, I come back the next day with steel wool to knock down the little fines, and then apply another coat, and then another coat the same way. The video on the left is another build that I made, but thank you all for watching. I'll talk to you all directly. Cheers.